Geez, Bob's always late.
Oh, he's almost here.
Plenty of time.
He's got 20 seconds. 20 seconds, 20 seconds.
The meeting's called to order. We've got a short agenda tonight. First on the meeting is public comment. Is anyone here to speak on something that's not on the agenda? No, hearing nothing like that. First thing on our agenda is the printed agenda, approval not required. The applicant, Ronaldo Andre, plan of land, to correct a property line at 10 Whispering Pines Road. Could you comment on that, Judd?
I certainly can. For the record, Judd Cornock, Town Planner. This application, actually, just the application came into us last week. There was an indication from the applicant that they wanted to adjust a property line. They were trying to decide at the time between an A&R and an 81X, a perimeter plan. We published the agenda anticipating them being on and filing an A&R. We were informed afterward that they had not filed an A&R application. In fact, they had done the 81X plan through the Registry of Deeds, and so they no longer needed the board to take action on an A&R. So rather than revise the agenda, we just kept it the same way, and we figured we'd just explain that to the board, and I recommend you take no action on the agenda item. We're cleaning up the record with the town clerk, asking for them to withdraw the application.
Excellent. All right, so moving on then. The next thing on the agenda is a public hearing.
Excuse
The
me,
applicant-
Madam Chair.
Don't we have to
Oh.
take
Can we vote on the minutes before?
Yes.
Don't we have to also vote that we're not gonna take it up,
No.
or not?
we do
Okay,
not.
just
No
ignore it.
action.
Okay.
Oh,
I recommend approval of the minutes of February 28th, 2023, with some minor corrections.
thank you.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Approved. Now, the public hearing. The applicant is Michael Galasso. Special permit application for parking within 5 feet of a property line at 545 Main Street. Jim?
Yeah, I have a point of order to bring up. This is on all special permits and all site plan review. I wanted to ask the applicant if they're, according to the Code of Falmouth, Chapter 313, if they have prepared their plans in accordance with land court specifications. That bylaw I referenced that I've shared with all the other planning board members in the past requires all site plans and all special permits to be submitted prior to the hearing start in accordance with land court requirements. And the only workaround it is if they have a specific requirement that they want to get waived, that they need to come to the meeting and ask for a waiver for all those things before the meeting starts. So they would have to give us a list. This is in my opinion, and I'll let anyone else comment on it. I've researched this quite carefully. That they would have to give, before the meeting starts, they would, and under the instruction of the town planner, they'd have to be warned that they have to do this, that they want specifically to waive drainage, waive, basically doing a study in the land court to see if there's any easements around the property. There's 2 pages of requirements that our bylaw says shall be done for both site plan and special permit. And we have not been following it. Somewhat we've gotten away from it. And I believe it leaves us subject to appeal, that anything that we would approve without following our own bylaws and waiving components of it would leave us subject to appeal. And it's a very serious issue, and I've brought it up in the past, and I'm bringing it up as a point of order tonight to make sure we start addressing it.
Yeah, did you want to comment on that?
Well, other than the planning office is still really looking into exactly what those regulations mean and what an applicant would have to indicate on a plan, we're still working through that process. I understand it's important and it's an important topic. We're just not there yet to really comment fully on exactly what that means in terms of the stamp and the seal and the certification of it all. So I would just ask for a little bit more time for us to get our feet under us in order to address that.
But we will be working on it.
I simply want to ask the professional engineer that prepared the plans, did they prepare them to the land court specifications, yes or no? If they say yes, and they follow the specifications, as per chapter 313, they're all set. But in some cases, they're already asking for waivers in the middle of the meeting. I mean, I've heard applicants, we're halfway into the meeting, they're asking for waivers on drainage. It should have been done before the meeting started, and that's my whole point. I'm not against giving the
Mr. Porcelli a
waivers.
chance to
No,
answer?
but I'm not against the waivers, but it's just the procedure. If they want to ask for waivers, they've got to do it from the get-go, not start a meeting, get influencing on the board and what they wanted, and then ask for, I just don't think it's right. If they want a waiver, they got to ask for it right up front.
Understood.
Mr. Porcelli?
Thank you, Chairperson Harris. For the record, Mike Borselli, I represent the applicant. We prepared the plan in accordance with all the standards and procedures that we prepared site plans before this body in my entire working experience of 35 years. This reference to a land court standard. Land court plans are, in my experience, are only subdivision plans where lots are created and they have to be done to land court standards, which means certain levels of precision for survey measurements, certain recordable registry of deeds standards for recording. I've never, in my experience, had to prepare a plan. You can't prepare a site plan to land court standards. There's too much information. The drafting levels and the specifications of the land court, there's too much information. It's a vague reference that I've yet to be able
Are you
to.
familiar with this chapter? of the
No,
bylaws?
why don't you read it to me, because I'm not familiar with it, if
No,
you could.
just let's not interrupt him.
Okay.
I've never heard of this. I've never been asked to do it in all my 35 years of experience before this planning board.
Could I ask you a question then?
Sure.
Just because I don't have any idea what the answer is. We've been looking, as we prepare for these meetings, looking at the plans. What we look for really is that stamp, your stamp on it. And then somewhere along the line, not in the distant past, also appeared a little written statement, apparently certifying the same thing that I thought the stamp certifies. Could you tell me something about that? What does the stamp stand for? And
I
what
don't
does
know
the
what
little...
stamp you're referring to. On my plans, I prepared two plans, a plan of existing conditions that shows all property lines, existing conditions, dimensions of property lines, lot areas, frontage. The existing conditions plan was stamped and sealed by a registered professional land surveyor, not me. The engineering standards and designs on the plan were prepared by a registered professional civil engineer, me. The stamps of both professionals are on the plans in the appropriate places. I've never heard of this standard. I've saw a piece of paper held up with a paragraph. I've never read it. It's never been brought up to me by anyone else on the board or any of your staff in all the years I've practiced in this town.
Thank you. So we are
Can I just-
apparently all in discovery here, working
Can
on
I
it.
just point out that it's in the Code of Falmouth, Chapter 300. It's been there, and it's been used by this board in the past. It's been a while, but I was told that some of this, that sometimes it saves the boards millions of dollars because plans had been submitted that weren't up to standards and they weren't held. Mike, if you want, here's a copy of it if you want. Here's what I do. I read the Code of Falmouth, and all I do is look up what site plan review is required, and that's a copy from it. And I'm surprised you're not familiar with it, because all the years you've been practicing, it's been there.
And I'm surprised it hasn't been brought up in any site plan review hearings before this board. It hasn't been brought up by your town engineer, who does a
That's-
thorough vetting of every standard
Here's my
and
point.
offers you a referral.
I found this, it's a bylaw that exists in writing. We either change the bylaw or we ask for waivers, because if we go ahead with ignoring it, I think it puts your plan and every other plan subject to appeal, and it's something that needs to be corrected. That's my whole point. There is a
So-
solution for it by asking for waivers right up front. If the board votes for a majority, the waivers are given, and we go forward. But ignoring it, I don't think is a good thing, just because you don't know about it. It's a written bylaw, and it needs to be dealt with one way or the other, in my opinion. I will defer to counsel on it, we've had the same thing come up.
And we'll look into it.
Well, we actually got rid of the design review committee for the same reason, because we found out they weren't paying attention. For years and years and years, they weren't paying attention to the bylaw, and they were ignoring it. They were having meetings without minutes, without notes, and everything they did was subject to review. And as soon as we that is a mistake we didn't know about, and as soon as we corrected it, and we changed the design review, they took that away from them, and they don't no longer do it because they couldn't proceed properly. So mistakes have been found and corrected in the past, and we need to find a correction for it.
We may have to. Is there anyone else on the board who'd like to comment?
Yeah, I do.
Paul?
Mr. Brusselli, thank you for your comments. Mr. Brusselli is not on trial here. He's trying to offer his opinion on his experience, and I think this is an issue that needs to be taken up with the board and not back and forth with a applicant to one of the projects here. I don't think it's fair to put him on the spot.
Oh, he addressed me?
Yeah.
Well, I was responding to you through the chair, and if I could, one more, I'm reading the last sentence of this paragraph. The classification and precision of the site plan shall conform to the requirements of the most recent Land Court Manual of Instructions, except that specific requirements in these regulations shall take precedent. I'm not really sure what that means, but the Land Court Manual of Instructions sets out instructions for various plans, levels of precision for various plans. It doesn't mean you must do the site plan to land court standards for like preparation of a petition plan where you're subdividing lots. I think this is very fuzzy, and I think you should get clarification.
I think that we will get clarification.
When I do a site plan, in my experience, I rely on what I've done in the past, and that's the way I function with every plan I prepare and provide to you.
Thank you. Pat?
I would also like to say, like Paul, that I've been on this board a long time already, and I never remember this having been brought up, period. And as you know, Brian Curry was the prior planner who was here for a long time, and if there was compliance needed, I would have expected that he would have brought it up. Not necessarily so, and Jim, I'm not arguing with you. You've had your turn, Jim.
I don't disagree. Let's change the bylaw.
You said that before. I think what we're gonna do is move on. If you have an issue, I think we're gonna research the issue.
My only issue is, I believe we're out of order, and
You're out of order right now.
then I'll be quiet. I've made my point.
You did make your point, and you've raised the issue, which is what you wanted to do, and we'll be looking into it further. And Mr. Porcelli, thank you, and I apologize to you. So, moving on, special permit application for parking within 5 feet of a property line. Let's attend to the issue at hand. Who is going to speak here?
The notice.
Oh, the notice of the hearing.
Public notice of this public meeting was published on March 10th, 2023, and March 17th, and 62 abutters were notified by regular mail.
Okay, are you gonna bring that plan down?
I'm getting it up, I'm not presenting.
No,
I'm just
I
getting
know.
it up.
Mr. Galasso, you're on.
We won't get into the full presentation, we'll do that when the next item comes up, but the special permit for parking within 5 feet of the property line is needed for the east and the south property lines of the property. There have been cars parking there since the 60s when the original building was built. There are cars that park on both sides of the property line on the east side that abuts the motel, and in the back part, the parking is up to the property line, and there's been a fence there for years. So this is an existing, I guess you can call it existing non-conforming use that's been there, and is needed for continuing parking of the project that's being proposed.
Madam Chair, if I may.
Yes.
Mike, there's another tab up at the very top. That's the site plan.
Okay, let me see that.
Yep.
There we go.
There's a zoom-in feature right just below your, where the menu is. It's right at the very top of the plan.
Yeah, might be more experience. we'll spend more time on the site plan when we get further on to the presentation and stuff, but you can see where the parking is on the east property line and on the rear property line too.
So it would be within 5 feet of both the back line and the
Yes.
sideline facing east?
Yep.
Any questions from the board? Any comments? John?
I'm just wondering, since this is a pre-existing situation, if maybe the previous owner had applied for a special permit for this, or if it just started happening and no one ever said anything about it.
I don't know what the situation was.
So we looked into that question. The only special permit that we could find on file was very vague, and it was for an addition to the existing building. It really didn't provide any sort of detail at all. There was no mention of parking within the 5 feet of the property line. I don't recall when exactly that date was of the special permit. My sense was it predated the language in the bylaw that indicated you needed a special permit for parking within 5 feet, but I can't say that for certain. But nothing on file for that at all.
Is that for the planning board records, or does that include zoning board records?
That includes zoning board.
Okay, thank you.
So, this is novel to me. It's a pre-existing parking situation. Do you actually need a special permit for that?
Well, so our
Be
opinion,
a fact.
sure. Our opinion is the bylaw says that you do. They're modifying the rear of the parking lot, so they're not really keeping it the same way that they had it previously. So they've turned the parking spaces. They're now closer to, well, I don't know if they're closer to the line, but they've turned it. They're also making adjustments to the parking lot. So to be thorough, we felt it necessary to just complete the special permit along with the site plan to make sure that we've dotted our i's and crossed our t's.
Okay, and could you comment on doing the special permit about the parking when we have not really dealt with the site plan?
Well, so it's really all one, right? So the site plan review, you're going to be talking a lot about parking. The special permit, we figured you could open the hearing, have any comments about the parking specifically within 5 feet of the property line. If the board is okay with that, you could close the hearing, you could take testimony. But if you're okay with closing the hearing, you still have some time to deliberate on the site plan review. And then once you finally approve or disapprove the site plan review, or whatever action you take on that, you can then issue a decision on the special permit as well.
Sounds like a good way to go. Knowing now the ground rules for this, is there anyone on the board who wishes to comment further before we ask for the No? Mr. Glasso, is there anything further you want to say? They are pre-existing spaces, aren't they?
Yes, they are.
Is there anything else to be said about them?
Nothing that I have right now, Madam Chair. When we get into the rest of the project and we get more into the site plan, might be some comments to be had there, but not for the special permit for the parking within 5 feet.
Okay, well, I think we won't even close the hearing. Let's just move on.
Do you want to take public comment?
I didn't see anyone who wished to comment. Is there someone who does wish to comment? Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, please do, and give your name.
My name is Bill Edis. I'm a budding neighbor. I'm just concerned that you have 71 units. I'm assuming that you're going to have 71 cars. I'm assuming that there's usually, you have a significant other, and that's 142 cars. Where's all these cars going to park? I'm directly across the street. I have tractor trailers coming in there. They're trying to back in there. It's like it blocks the road. It's very difficult to get in and out of my place because of, you know, all the congestion when that place was going. And
Right.
just concerned about all the cars. That's my issue.
I think that issue is actually going to come up when we talk about the site plan. This is really just about where the parking spaces are too close to the boundaries of the lot,
Right, that's all I had to
not
say.
about the number of
for now.
spaces,
Thank you.
right? Which is your place?
I own a place right across the street,
Directly across.
536.
Thank you.
Which one is that?
536.
Okay, then let's move on then to the site plan.
There's one more.
That lady wants to say something.
would like to speak.
Oh, you are also. Is this about parking in general, about the, being close to the, thank you.
Thank you for the notice. My name is Shelby Allen. I live at 30 Maribel Lane with my husband, Phil Goodwin. Our family's been there over 30 years. We love Falmouth. This is the first notice I've gotten of a town issue, and I'm glad to be here. Our backyard at 30, I found the site plan confusing, but you can read that. Our property, our backyard goes straight to the chain link fence from 4540. I'm out of breath. I've been actually I just had surgery, but I'm doing fine, and I'll slow down. Okay. In the years that Royal was there, oh, by the way, my office bedroom is in the back of the house, 30 Maribel Lane, and in the years Royal was, and I work at in the middle of the night. I'm writing, middle of the night, 4 a.m. You would hear the dumpster being from the Royal Food Service being unloaded. Noisy, okay. There was also debris thrown over the fence, but I'm gonna, a restaurant owner isn't gonna have that issue. My husband and I are concerned about the noise from the dumpster. And if you need a dumpster, if you have a restaurant, put it somewhere else, not within 5 feet of us. Also, is the restaurant going to be able to, will the restaurant have a license for live music? Okay?
Excuse me, and take all the time that you need, but what we'd like to do right now is just talk about the parking.
The park,
right close to the boundary line of the lot.
if the dumpster is parked within the applied for area, we might hear noise from it, as we have before. Do you have any other questions?
No, I think that's it.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Glasso, would you like to respond to that concern?
You know, we have done many projects that are in the middle of residential areas, and this issue about, having the trash picked up at 4 o'clock or 5 o'clock in the morning often comes up. And since that is a concern, and we abut, our neighbors, we'll make sure that our contract, whether it's with Cavosa or someone else, we won't allow them to pick up anything before 5:30 or 6 o'clock. Absolutely, yeah, because we have a separate contract with them. Yes. So it's not town doesn't pick that up from our dumpster.
Excuse me, if you're going to speak, please don't speak to one another.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yes,
I'm
we can.
sorry, those are just the way it works, yeah.
Yes, we can designate what time they pick it up.
Good, thank you. Anyone else who wants to speak about the parking close to the, within 5 feet of the boundary line? No. In that case, we're going to move on now to the site plan issue, which covers all of the issues that could come up. And again, the applicant is Michael Galasso, site plan review application for a 71-unit workforce housing building with a 973-square-foot restaurant at 545 Main Street. So, there isn't, apparently, we're not complete yet on everything that is required for the submission. How would you like to deal with that? We have already had your presentation. We've heard it. You know that the board likes the project, wants to see it go forward. So I guess your concern and our concern is on timing. When will the application be complete? Do you have any idea?
I'm not sure we're missing anything, Madam Chairman. What is it that we're missing?
I'm trying to get there. Thank you. Well, so I think it's worthwhile just discussing right off the bat. There's currently a deficit in the required parking. There was an effort on the applicant's side to obtain a shared parking agreement, so that is still outstanding for the board to review and consider. There's a minor note in terms of the impervious area, just a detail for the proposed pervious pavement that we still need to solidify. Also, the photometric plan arrived today. I don't believe we've got a copy of it for the board, but perhaps I'm wrong, but there's still some outstanding comments on the photometric plan. And again, a minor thing, when we reviewed a number of items that were outstanding, one of those was separate bathrooms for staff inside the restaurant or for the proposed restaurant. So that would require a revised floor plan be submitted to the board for your consideration as well. We've held off on pushing that item only because there's still a conversation about the parking. And the restaurant obviously requires a certain number of parking, so we didn't feel like it would be appropriate to have the applicant revise the floor plan, only to potentially have to revise it again once a parking arrangement is figured out. And so with that,
We appreciate that. In fact, of the things that were brought up last time, you've responded to them. So that for the most part, that's good. But until you're 35 spaces short on the parking, and until that's just, too many to be short, and until that's resolved in some way,
Well, it was resolved.
how?
It was resolved. We had a parking agreement with the church next door, which we had talked about numerous times.
You have a written agreement?
It was in the process of being drafted by their attorney.
Well, we're not, the planning department and the planning board wasn't aware of that, and we don't have a copy of even the draft.
I think the planning staff was aware of that, and maybe they can explain what's happened since then.
so
They
we
didn't
were.
know it this morning.
It's been a topic of conversation throughout this process, and our understanding is it was being worked out. Through this special permit process, there was notification of, obviously, to referrals to other town departments. The assessor's office contacted us and just informed us that there would be a potential issue with the church and the way that they would be taxed in terms of the shared parking, and they wanted to make sure that the church was aware of that. They then informed the church of that, and that created some issues with the applicant and the church in trying to figure out a shared parking arrangement. Beyond that, I really can't speak to the details other than,
Okay,
what I-
that's where we were last Thursday,
correct.
right? And as of this morning, we hadn't gotten any further as far as having an agreement.
Correct.
Unless there's an agreement, it's not solved, really. So we can have an extension, so you have more time for this, you can withdraw it.
We don't have any more time. Maybe you could vote to approve it with a condition that we come back before we pull a building permit with the parking. Because it's very hard, it's Holy Week. Very hard to communicate, it took me 6 months to get to a point where I got them to agree to give us the parking. Okay, it got undone with a matter of one phone call.
Right.
Not a phone call to me, but a phone call to the party I was negotiating with. So because of that, I'm not sure where we're gonna be able to go with it. So I think your choice is to approve the project and let us move on with the condition that before we can pull a building permit, we have to come back and show you that we have, or show staff that we have adequate off-site parking. This is the only zone in your ordinance that doesn't permit a reduction in parking.
And yet that's what we're all working with. Jim?
Just on the reduction of parking, I believe the requirement, I'll defer to check and believe it, you need a 5-year lease for the parking. It has to be within 300 feet. I've seen, Pat, do you remember those requirements? Vaguely?
Yeah.
I do. I believe the requirement, and it's only from memory, I didn't go look it up, but it's a 5-year lease and it has to be with 300 feet. And if they can get that, that'd be okay, but they should, I think it's specific to those terms. 300 feet limit, which this sounds like it matches. But it's not a handshake, it's a 5-year lease. Check on that, I believe that's the language from my experience.
If I may,
please.
there is such language in the, as you know, we went through a recodification process. There was such language in the old bylaw, which allowed for specific types of projects, mixed-use developments. This one's a bit tricky because in order to achieve the density that the applicant is looking for, they are choosing a commercial accommodation special permit route with the Zoning Board of Appeals. Our understanding of the commercial accommodations section of the bylaw is that essentially, if an applicant wants to create a hotel, an inn, a motel, etc., those are all types of commercial accommodations, they can do so provided that they provide adequate parking, fit within the dimensional requirements, be it building height, setbacks, lot coverage, etc. They can do the things that a normal hotel or motel would include. Those might be a dining facility, rented rooms, maybe even a restaurant. But they have to provide all of those items that I just mentioned, i.e. parking, they can't exceed the building height. All of those things, those dimensional characteristics have to be met. So we have, in this situation, our interpretation is that by going that route for a commercial accommodation, that provision within the BR district to allow for a reduction of parking doesn't apply because they're choosing a different path. Now, if they chose the Mr. Cod path, the mixed residential and commercial overlay district, you also have the ability, the board has the ability to reduce parking if you see that it's a benefit. But choosing that path would drastically reduce the density that this applicant would be looking at. So they wouldn't be looking at 71 units, they'd be looking at roughly 35, 32, somewhere in that range. So I guess the easiest way to summarize this is it's never been done in town before, so we're trying to figure out the best path forward and the best way to permit this, what we consider to be an important project. And so through the ZBA, they will get that special permit, or will apply for the special permit for commercial accommodations. But through you folks, you need to make sure that they have adequate parking. And that's essentially been the most important topic for us, is to make sure that all the rented rooms have a parking space, because that's what the bylaw says that you have to provide. And in addition to that, because there's a proposed restaurant, those seats translate to parking. That needs to be added to the rented rooms. That's why you're at 88 spaces. There's really nothing in the bylaw, and we've scoured this bylaw to figure out a way to allow for the board to consider a reduction of parking, and we can't find anything. So that's where we're at this point, the planning staff is. And obviously the shared parking arrangement, in my opinion, needs to be provided to the board for you to see that someone has agreed to share their lot and provide the adequate parking for this site or for this property. But again, that's just my
The suggestion has been made that we approve with, we give a conditional approval. That would be really uncomfortable. Very much so. I'd like to hear from other board members on that. Pam?
So, Mike, in your agreement, is this 365-day-a-year agreement so that on Easter or some other holiday, you're not going to be restricted by the church in the parking that they are going to allow?
So just so you know a little bit of history, the nursing home used to parking at the church over the years too, with an agreement that they had. And there's other people who use church parking lots for other facilities throughout the town in joint use, because it makes good sense. So to answer your question, first of all, we don't believe that we're going to need any parking spaces over there. If you recall, we're proposing numerous alternatives to someone owning their own car. I think we need to get away from that, and I said it from the very beginning, that is this about cars, is this about providing housing for people? So it's, in front is a bus stop. We talked about the shared electric cars that we would have there. We talked about bicycles. We've talked about all kinds of alternatives which meet some of your requirements that you have in your ordinances about being able to reduce parking. Unfortunately, that ordinance doesn't apply to our particular situation. That's the problem that Jed, and I appreciate all the work that he's done, Melinda and everyone else, to get us to this point. And we thought that we had it solved by having a shared parking agreement with the church next door. So, I don't know what the church is gonna do. They were very strongly scared about the comments they heard from our town assessor's office. They're very sensitive to the financial situation. And so I can't tell you today that we're gonna be able to reach an agreement with them or not. And I don't know of any place else within 300 feet that will have the number of spaces that we need. It's a good use of that parking lot. There's 121 spaces there that sit vacant. You know, we only use our cars 4% of the time. So, you know.
Well, you can see the box that we're in.
Yeah, no, I totally understand. I do. And we thought we had a solution. I'm not saying it won't be, but right now, their answer is no, and it could just because they're concentrated on other things than providing parking for Michael Asso and a project next door to them, which they very strongly support. I mean, it's part of the mission of the church to help provide housing for those who need it, and they're behind that 100%, and they are willing to give us the parking.
What is the consequence to the project if, in fact, we continue this without a resolution tonight?
Well, we have a purchase agreement that has a certain time limit on it. And luckily, we have a seller who are the folks who own the nursing home and other nursing homes in town too, have been very cooperative with us. I don't know how much further, and I've said this to Jed, I just don't know how much further we can stretch them. You know, I have partners who put up some money along with myself to get this project forward because they felt that it was an important project for them and their businesses. I mentioned that before. Some of them appeared here before you, you know, that it's important to the businesses on Main Street and the restaurants on Main Street. They're the ones who approached me in particular to try to work this project out so they can have housing for their staff. And I think everyone's in agreement with that. And I understand we're sort of in a box regarding what we're going to do with the cars. And I've provided information that says affordable housing doesn't require as much parking as normal other market rate projects do. You know, I don't have an answer besides, you know, I'm not sure what the concern is about having a condition that we can't pull a building permit till we have satisfied this board, your staff, that we have adequate parking. I don't quite understand what the risk is. I think the risk is all upon us and us to prove that, because we're going to be spending more money to move this project ahead, put together the financing and everything. We still will always have that over our head that we can't really do that until we satisfy the parking condition.
I think the concern on the board, I might be wrong, and I ask the other board members to chime in and let's get a correct understanding, is setting a precedent that we would then be, parking is a problem all over Main Street, that we would be setting a precedent going forward. And yet I know that we have just approved a site plan up at this end of Main Street where the restaurants aren't required really to produce proof of parking for the number of tables that they have. So we've got mixed messages going here. And here we keep saying that the overriding problem facing Falmouth and taking care of the people who are here is having housing at different levels, and particularly at workforce housing, so that we can have fully staffed restaurants, hospitals, doctors' offices, places where people work. If that's our number one need, why aren't we willing to do exactly what you're asking? And I really would like to do that. And yet, here we are. Pam, what do you think?
I'm torn on it, truly torn, because the restaurant is going to take up 17 spaces, and there are 35 extra spaces that are needed.
It's the number of spaces.
The number of spaces entirely. But I'm also torn because when I looked at the plan, I thought, I don't know whether a fire truck can still get by there.
The fire department already approved
And,
that.
yeah,
So
there's
they
a
know.
note that just came through this afternoon.
The fire department just commented on the revised plans
Right.
today.
And
Right.
said,
Maybe. May I read it?
yes.
Okay. It does appear that the parking lot, even after the adjustments, would still be very difficult to maneuver a fire apparatus around. The overlay from engineering shows the turn could only be accomplished if all the cars were parked correctly and the full travel lanes kept clear. The landscape plan linked to the email is showing 3 trees. one on the southeast corner of the building and the other two on the island across the parking lane. The canopy on the trees shows that they are encroaching into the travel lanes. This would make maneuvering even more difficult. And this is from Craig O'Malley, and I don't know, because it came at 3 this afternoon, whether Mike has had a chance to even see this.
They asked us to make an alley for the fire truck 16 feet wide all the way around the building, which we've done. I
And
mean,
you
that's-
did it, I know.
That's what we were asked to do, and that's what we've done. And we used a little model to, make sure that the truck can get around and everything. So we haven't seen that, and I don't know if Mike has any comment on it.
I just like to comment that we had a meeting with the fire department, and the mandate was 16 feet, and to demonstrate that the apparatus turning radius template fit. We can't control if people don't park properly.
Right.
In that case, you'll never have confidence any parking lot that we design is gonna be adequate. So
Right.
where do you draw the line? And I understand, and believe me, I know about fire protection, my son's a firefighter, and I think that this is adequate, and we've done what we can to meet their standards. But, I mean, I would think the manager of the facility would make sure people are parked, because if it's not in his best interest if a fire truck can't get through either, let alone the people that have to actually fight the fire.
And that, what I would think would be part of the management of the building. If they see somebody not parked properly and they have the license plate of the resident, they're gonna go and say, hey,
This sounds very much like
So-
conditioning.
I'm just bringing up
No,
a
I
potential
understand.
problem, and I just saw this. I am not, I think, as concerned about the parking for all of the reasons that Mike has described, that a number of the people are probably not going to have cars. I don't know how many are not going to have cars. And also the fact that we're allowing restaurants all up and down Main Street without parking, and this is on Main Street, and it's not very far removed from where we're allowing restaurants without parking, so I'm not as concerned about that. As far as giving a permit, pre-existing, I think we need to handle the parking issue, period. I agree with what you brought up, it's not gonna be easy to resolve. But I don't think that should override right now the need for affordable housing.
Well, I'm not sure about that, because we've been working on changing the bylaws so that we can have more affordable housing. That's why we created Mr. Cod. And the fact that it doesn't fit the accommodations rule and density, we know already that there's a lot else about the parking requirements that need to be thought through, that need to be changed, and it's on the agenda for the group that's meeting now to make changes in the bylaw and to be able to take into account other provisions that are being made. The thing, when we were talking about it in the planning department, the Falmouth is growing. And certainly in cities, you don't try to have a parking space for every renter at all, or you couldn't have the city there at all. In fact, if you want a parking space, you have to pay for it extra. So it doesn't come along with your rent. So we're teeter-tottering in the scale of the community. Paul?
I think we're all struggling with this, and I'm wondering if there's another way of looking at this. This is a very unique building. It's a very unique proposal. In some cases, there's 4 people in one room. And I'm wondering if there could be some way on limiting the number of vehicles that the people who rent that might enable us to reduce the parking requirement. For example, 4 people in one room, and probably not going to have 4 cars or anything like that. The type of people who'll be renting that are those who are probably here to work and use public transportation. And I'm wondering if there's a way around this where you could limit the requirements that enable us to reduce the,
There would if
or
we
waive
had a
some of the
bylaw that
parking
allowed that.
Right.
But we don't.
That's the challenge here, is that there's no provision in the zoning bylaw that we can find that allows for a reduction in parking for this site that the
So
board
this
could
is-
authorize.
So this is an issue of handling a unique situation.
Yes.
Yeah.
Chairman, I don't believe our board is supposed to rewrite the bylaws.
We're not.
Well,
Well, we have a
we're
process
we're
of doing it.
creating a zoning that doesn't exist right now. We're finding something that's in between Mr. Cod, in between B1 and business redevelopment, and we are creating a new one, and I don't think we have any right to do it. I think we're way outside, even considering doing it. Creating a special bylaw for this one because we like it, because we think affordable housing's correctly. That's the case, then we could say, go ahead, we want affordable housing, and this board has the right to just change the zoning for one applicant. I think it's a really bad direction we're going.
Do you think that every time you give a waiver, you've changed the zoning?
No, I think waiver's okay, but this isn't a few cars.
I understand that. John or Bob, what's your reaction?
Yeah, I'm not comfortable with giving a condition approval, but I would be very amenable if we got the required documents that we're looking for, say Wednesday or Thursday or something, and calling in a special meeting at some other point before our normal meeting dates or whatever. I'd be open to any day possible that would help the applicant.
There. Good idea. Thank you. John?
Whatever we decide, when he goes to the zoning board of appeal, can he not ask for relief? These conditions?
Good question.
It's an excellent question, Mr. Drewley.
When I was on the zoning board, we didn't pay a whole lot of attention to what the planning board had to say. If we felt that it was the right thing to do.
Yeah, so,
I don't know if we can vote on this with the condition that the parking has to be met. The applicant then he's got to go to the zoning board of appeals anyway.
correct.
And ask for relief from that. I don't know if that's how it can be done or not.
Well, so,
I'm not recommending that, I'm just asking the question.
I get it. What we've read in the bylaw also indicates that the zoning board of appeals wouldn't be able to grant relief either because of, and I mean, I can read the section of the bylaw just for the record so that everybody knows where we're at. So, 240, section 14.1F, parking reduction. It's a two-part process. Applicants are allowed to reduce their parking by right. And it says, the off-street parking required to service retail, business, or professional uses on a lot may be reduced according to the parking reduction table below. And of course, it has certain elements that number of spaces, you get this certain reduction. Our interpretation is the only thing that would qualify for this applicant for a by right reduction would be potentially that retail for the restaurant, selling of goods. In the table, and again, call out the fact that residential is not included in those uses. So all 71 units would not, that parking wouldn't be allowed by right reduction. So if we go back to the restaurant, it's a 34-seat restaurant. If the calculation is 1 per 2 seats, we're talking about 17 parking spaces. In the table, in that same section I referenced, 0 to 20 spaces required, there's no by right reduction allowed. It then further goes on to say you can further reduce, I'll just read it verbatim, the required number of spaces may be further reduced by a special permit from the Board of Appeals upon the board's determination that special circumstances such as shared use of a parking lot by activities having different peak demand times render a lesser provision adequate for all parking needs. Again, the clause that, or the wording that we're looking at is maybe further reduced. Again, this is part of the same parking reduction section. So our interpretation is that if you're allowed to take that by right reduction, you can then further reduce that number through a special permit process with the Zoning Board of Appeals.
But it applies only to the restaurant seating, to the restaurant spaces, is that right?
That is correct. That's our interpretation. And again, don't
So it
forget.
would knock it down by 17.
Well, don't forget, the by right reduction table, 0 to 20 spaces, which they qualify in that category, there is no by right reduction. If they had 21 to 30 spaces required, they could get a 10% reduction. So again, we're in that awkward area where we just cannot find a way for the board to consider a parking reduction other than an off-site shared parking agreement. That's the only thing we can find in the bylaw as an option. And as I said before, I would recommend that the board have that document in hand before approving either your special permit or your site plan approval.
Well, let's try and combine having it in hand with Bob's idea of trying to have something in hand quickly, and we can get together between meeting times in order to deal with that, if it can be done. Because in order to do that, we'd need to extend the deadline on it, and continue it. Is that right? The deadline right now is April 3rd.
You have to continue it to a specific date.
Hmm?
You have to continue it to a specific date.
Well, we'd pick a date.
Right. So, and then we have to give 48 hours public notice to post the agenda. So with an unknown document, I don't know how you could do that.
Other than at the date that you specify, you open a hearing and you continue once again if the
Right,
document's
that is
not.
how you do it. You pick a date, see how it goes.
You know, it's up to the board.
I'd like town
Well-
council to see it first.
Like next Saturday, or,
Oh,
I'm busy.
we'd pick a meeting date.
okay.
They're not
Well,
on
no,
a
as soon
thin
as the
air.
document's in hand, then the 48-hour notice goes into effect, and then we choose a date from that. But once we have it in hand.
Well, right now, our next meeting is April 11th. That might not be time to get it sorted out. The one beyond that would be what, the 20,
April 11th is technically right before town meeting.
it is, I think we're not going to meet then, and so it would be,
Then it's April 20.
We do have a meeting scheduled for that date
Right.
for a small administrative matter.
Right.
But
There's only 30
Yeah,
minutes.
we could also take something else up too, because it is a planning board meeting.
right.
Correct. It can't have full, like this. It can't be a long meeting.
No.
There's only a half hour.
Right.
And then the next meeting is April 25th.
25th?
And what is the meeting beyond that? The first meeting in May?
Let me just check. May 9th.
May 9th may be the better way to go. Paul?
Listening to the discussion of Mr. Galasso, I think he has some constraints on his timeline, too. So if this is extended too far, he may not be able to meet those timelines. So I think we need to communicate with him on whether he's able to meet these guidelines before we set these dates. You kind of alluded to the fact that you've got some commitments that have to be done by certain dates.
Right. Yeah,
I don't know what they
we
are.
gotta get to the ZBA, and get our application filed and get ZBA approval. That's really what's squeezing the schedule.
When is that
We
meeting?
can't go to ZBA until we get through here, so.
Mike, when is that meeting?
We don't have one scheduled yet.
He hasn't applied yet.
you may be able to file an application with the ZBA. You should probably just consult with them first to make sure that they understand where we're at. They may allow you to file an application at least.
Last time I checked with the administrator there was when we got through, the planning board should accept our application. Whether or not they've changed their opinion on that, I don't know, but that was the last time when I inquired.
Okay.
I would think that if you can get the agreement, we could do something on April 11th. I don't want to push us into May, that's 2 months from
Yeah,
now.
yeah.
And we could take it up on the 25th, but that's really close to May. But that gets us past the Holy Week.
Right, but April,
I
if
think
you
you
get
should
this
come up with
agreement,
what date you'll be chairing in Japan.
Just to
I know
point
you
out,
will.
the agreement isn't the only issue.
Right.
There's the photometric plan, and I forget what else, but it's not just a quick meeting for the contract to be looked at and to decide that. There's just a couple other issues with the photometric plan. There's a issue with the interior,
The floor plan.
the floor plan for a bathroom for the restaurant. So there are still little issues that need to be cleared up, that I don't know if that allotted time before town meeting would be long enough. I think it would be stretching it, especially since we already have another administrative matter on the agenda.
I agree with you, it wouldn't be enough, but how about the 25th? That's looking pretty crowded already.
But how much time have you planned for on the 11th?
There's a half hour.
Just a half hour? You couldn't start earlier and make it longer?
I mean, you could, but it's a long night from going from that to town meeting where you're gonna be sitting there till 11, 10, whatever.
She might be referring to the fact that I'll be sitting
Yeah.
here.
Just trying to help them out.
No, I get it.
I think this is too important to try to squeeze it in between town meeting. I just think there are more issues than just that. And I don't know how much, I'm not gonna be able to do that in a half an hour.
That's why I think
It'll
the
be tight.
25th would be a better fit for the numbers of things and to get Mike to be able to get something from the church.
Could I just make one comment?
Yes.
Jed read 240-14, 1F, the parking reduction. If there was a small amendment to that first sentence, one, that included residential, that one word added to that paragraph, to that sentence, would solve a good part of this problem. So that requires going to town meeting.
Right.
And if this board would agree that they would sponsor an article to make that amendment, November town meeting, that would feel much more comfortable to all of us.
It's always a possibility, I suppose, but we can't make a commitment right here.
I understand, but if you could put that into your working group, and you're talking about parking, if we can get to November, because if we were to get approval here tonight, we went to ZBA, we wouldn't start our working drawings until after that. We're right now scheduled not to start construction of this project until the beginning of next year. That's the fastest that we can get there and get all the drawings done and all the financing and all that stuff. But in order for us to get the financing, we have to have, your approval, get our discretionary approvals out of the way.
Well,
But I think that most people would consider,
the fact that even if it did go to town meeting doesn't mean it's gonna pass town meeting. That's,
got a pretty good record at town meeting.
plus it's residential, we haven't done any studies to show how much parking's needed for residents. There's a lot that goes into the parking, changing the whole parking. It's not just a quick fix. I'd love it to be a quick fix. I'd love it to be easy, but it's not. And there's a lot of places in the bylaw where it's mentioned, so it's not, I mean, it's not just one little word here for one bylaw. There's a lot that goes into parking.
But we want to be thinking about how we can make it possible, not all the reasons why we can't make it possible, because I can think of more reasons why we can't, but we're going to, and we are certainly going to hear from you before we close down tonight, because you've come here and I want you to have your say.
Thank you.
So it sounds like the 25th of April. Come back up, we'll see what we have at that time, and how we can go forward.
Yeah, and we'll do our best to get Michael, the comments that we received today. We've had some email issues, so we're just trying to get to as much information as possible. There's a small item, I shouldn't say small, there's an item with the truck turning radius, so we just want to make sure that we communicate directly about that, because I think it could affect one or two of the parking spaces, so they may have to be flexible there. I'm happy to also discuss the matter with the zoning administrator to see if there's a way in which the applicant can move forward on a concurrent path, so we're not holding anybody up.
Good, we're all in the same building, but I think before we ask for a motion on the extension, I'd like to hear from the abutters on this, and you wanted to speak on the parking.
Yes, ma'am. Go first, and then-
No, right there, thank you.
I lived in this town since 1962. I know from the fire department all the way up to just about the green, there's parking on either side. There's parking in Town Hall Square. There's parking behind the library, to the right of the library as well. So that's why these restaurants and behind Abishon have parking as well. A lot of times, often I go downtown to have some dinner, and I can't because there's no parking. It's just the way it is. It's common sense. You got 71 units. We can't assume that people are going to walk and take public transportation. So I want to know, are these people all going to try to park in my parking lot? I have residents there, I have commercial and, private residents living in it as well. And I know that we end up parking in my parking lot. And like I said, I invite you all to come sit in my store, my office, where my window is. I see the trucks that used to go in and out of there all the time. The traffic stopped on both sides, and that tractor trailer is trying to back in closest to the church. It's a mess. And between Dunkin' Donuts, and then you have Walgreens, You have all the low income, and I'm all for low income housing, trust me. There's plenty of room in this town. That's just not a great spot for it. It's not a wise decision, in my opinion. And the parking, like I said, you don't have any side street parking. It's down at the fire department to the green. And there's really no place. You can't assume that these people are gonna, like I said, take public transportation. You get 71 units times 2, 142 cars, never mind the restaurant. I think it's a bad idea. I mean, again, I'm sorry, I love, to help people out all the time, I do that, but it's not a good place to do it. I've been here, like I said, a long time, I know what's going on in this town. So I invite you to come sit in my window, you'll see it now as it is, just trying to get into Walgreens, I'm trying to get out of my office, it's terrible, it's terrible. That's all I have to say.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Anyone else who would like to speak about any issue involved with the site plan for the proposed project? Did you say all you wanted?
No. Thank you for this opportunity. The notice I got was about the meeting wasn't clear. I didn't realize there had been previous meetings. In particular, I didn't know until tonight this was workforce housing. You got me right there. Yes. And no one's against that. The thing that I raised the issue of noise from the dumpster, which has happened, and Michael Glasso said, "Don't worry about that." Good. The only other issue was, and this is not parking, is the restaurant going to have music? I didn't know it was for workforce housing. It's not like they're going to have I'm guessing you're not going to have a bar with 3 a.m. No, anyway, we're talking about parking. Oh, I know. Someone on the board, I forget who, I think it was Mr. Fox or Mr. Dreyer, said, let's be realistic. If they're 4 to a room, they're not going to have 4 cars. More to the point, I'm in Dunkin' Donuts. I'm in every place in town, and I see the kids on here on the Visa. And they're riding their bikes. They don't have cars. They're here because they need a job. And that was I'm totally new to this, as I just said. That's what came through to me. Sounds like a great project, but as Mr. Conrock, am I saying your name right?
Cornock.
Cornock, thank you. Okay, Cornock pointed out that this is falling between the cracks of the permitted, of the existing areas. I also live in Boston. I could tell you parking stories another time. Chairman Harris referred to the urban issues as Falmouth is changing from a town to people with cars who want parking. And I understand your point. I don't think, whatever you can do to get workforce housing, do it. Again, I don't have a business where trucks are trying to get in and out. But this is solvable. Everyone wants it. I can't believe that the specific document. You can fix this.
Well, thank you. I'm glad you're in favor of the project. That's good to hear. Thank you.
The only other concern I had was music, but we're not discussing that.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I just want to make one comment on Mr. Dreyer.
So we limit 1 person per room on the rooms that we have. On the studios in the 1 bedrooms, we do allow 2, but all the rooms, which there are 44 out of the 71, are just single rooms, and those are limited to one person per room.
Thank you.
There are bunk rooms down below. I think that's what he might have been referring to, that would allow up to 4 people, but that was put in at the request of the students at Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution, because their financial condition would only allow them to have something where they were sharing a room.
Thank you. Could we have a motion on the extension till April 25th?
So moved.
Second? All in favor?
Aye.
Madam Chair,
That's it for tonight on that.
if I may just clarify that motion, is that the motion to continue both the public meeting for site plan review and the public hearing for special permit?
Yes, it is. Thank you.
We need a deadline decision.
Okay, I think we're done with that for tonight. Thank you all. I'm sorry there's not a resolution. We'll,
April 25th would be at 6:30.
Thank you. I'll send you those.
And I also want to say, there's no guarantee it's going to be,
okay, we have,
it's going to last forever.
want to take a break?
Here, what does he represent? Man,
Yeah, we ought to just look across the street.
I can't picture it.
Jed may know.
What's that?
The gentleman here. Where is
All I
his
can think
property?
of
What does
across
he
the
represent?
It's right across the street.
But what is it?
Keep an Island
Walgreens
Street,
is the
please.
blind company.
Oh,
Keep
I
an
think
It's Cape and Island Street.
Yeah,
It's not in it.
that's Cape Island Street.
It is. He left his car.
Oh, drapery. Okay.
Okay, so for discussion items, we have,
Across the street.
first, a request for an administrative approval.
Read it.
It's across the street.
That's what he said.
What is this?
Okay, there's one for
Mike
each of
can
us.
see.
This is coming from John?
Oh, Mike handed out, this is a handout from Mike Ross.
Oh,
I didn't see it, okay?
and this is like what he wants to do at the station.
Co-living. Are you in?
It's going on 8 o'clock.
Depends.
What is when you're married?
I don't know.
We're
Mike
ready.
also handed it out.
I think,
It's okay.
The architect.
For the record,
oh,
Judd Cornock, Town Planner. We received this application for administrative approval from Bowler Engineering. It's for 249 Worcester Court, which is the TD Bank building right at the south, it's at the northeast corner of T-Ticket Highway and Worcester Court, as shown here. This is an image showing the conditions in April of 2022. And I'm just going to bounce to
TD Bank.
the site plan.
Oh, it's across the street from Stop and Shop?
Across from CBS.
Yeah, and CVS, yeah.
You know where the
the one
clock
across
is?
from Stop and Shop.
corner
Yeah.
There was no
So-
locus on that drawing, that's, I didn't know.
What is being proposed is a few things. The first, they're looking to make some adjustments to the ADA parking out in front. And so what I'm going to do is essentially just bounce to the image, and you'll see that currently there's 2 accessible parking spaces right up against the building. There's one located here. They are proposing to adjust it in this way, essentially relocate 2 of them over to this area. Also create a crosswalk, walking path, and adjust the concrete curb ramp and walkway to the building.
Empty lot?
They're also proposing to include speed humps located at each entrance of the driveway. So actually, this entrance here off of T-Ticket, as well as this drive off of Worcester Court. This area in here experiences some puddling, and they're proposing to essentially fix that issue, that grading issue there. They're also proposing to mill and overlay the entire site and restripe it, as shown on the plan here. And the last item is some minor landscaping improvements located around the building. I won't scroll through that plan, but it's included in your packet. So they've asked for administrative approval for me to administratively approve this if you're comfortable. And so I'm here to answer any questions that you might have.
Okay, questions, comments? Let's start down here. Pam?
I don't have any questions yet. What about the area, when we had a big storm a couple of years ago, we lost all of those trees down Worcester Court? Is that where some of that puddling is coming from?
I don't know.
No, I don't think so.
I don't know where you lost trees.
That's at a distance from that.
Right,
I think that was at the other end of Worcester Court,
Okay,
yeah.
sorry,
half mile away.
never mind.
Yeah. Paul?
No, I don't have
No,
any comment
Dan?
this time.
I think it'll be a great improvement, and I don't see any reason not to allow administrative approval.
Right. Down here?
Same, you know, if they want to improve it, why should we stop?
Yeah, I agree.
I agree also. Jim? You agree?
I'm just a little concerned that I think they're asking us to do recalculating the drainage, and we're gonna do that administratively. Is that what I heard requested? And if that is, it might be a step too far.
They're going to be addressing some of the puddling in this area.
I'm certainly not qualified to weigh in on that.
But I think it can be done administratively, because I think if Jed or Melinda have any questions,
They
they
might
can
be.
ask engineering.
Absolutely.
Right. And we would take their advice,
I would take their advice as
as
well.
they will.
So really, it's just a decision if you want the applicant to be coming in and doing this proposal, or if you'd allow us to do it for you.
Hearing no problems, do we need a motion for that?
I move administrative approval for
And a
this.
second?
I'll
Second.
second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Very good, thank you.
Now, committee reports. Paul has done, really, a very thorough job on committee reports. There are a lot of them. Paul? You want to go through your reports?
Oh, I thought we still had Seashell Lane. Are we done?
If I may, I believe the homeowner is here, and to perhaps just let him go home early and have a bite to eat. Maybe we take that out of order?
Okay.
Have a dessert then. So, if I may, this request came in via the building department. I alerted me as to a building permit application that the homeowner was looking to add a modest addition to their home. They are part of a subdivision that was approved back in 1982, as your packet indicates. And they're looking to exceed the lot coverage. So we reviewed the file, and we've included the letter that Eladio Gore issued back in 2007, I think. Speaking to this very topic. So in 82, when they approved the open space residential subdivision, there wasn't a provision that allowed up to 40% lot coverage if the subdivision created more than 50% open space. Fast forward to 1993, that,
Do you mean before cluster zoning? Is that what you're saying?
right,
Okay.
right. So in 1993, town meeting adjusted the cluster zoning and added that provision, that allowance to go up to 40% lot coverage. We're now here, and in 2007, they had a homeowner who was looking to do that very thing, exceed the 20% lot coverage, which is, normal. And so they just asked that a letter be submitted to the planning board, and then you considered it in your general correspondence and approved it back in 2007. So I simply asked this applicant to do the same thing, just to be consistent, and it's included for your packet, in your packet for your consideration.
Any questions? Jim?
So he's on a much smaller lot because they have open space all around.
Correct.
And I guess when we look at those things, and my experience into it, at that point, we should look at the lot coverage for the whole site. Because they're all sharing in that open space, because they now have a bigger lot. So what kind of lot coverage does the entire site have, considering all its open space? And, I mean, I can tell you, that is the way we've been treated, and I think he's got plenty of room, is what I'm saying. I think, I'm trying to speak favorably, not against this, but I believe that the way to look at this is the least that has been applied to the development I've been working on Kendall Lane. They didn't, even though we have individual lots, they considered our lot coverage as a site as a whole, because it was a comprehensive permit. And this being not a comprehensive permit, but a cluster zoning where the lot coverage is really allowed of the whole site, are they anywhere near 20% on the whole site wise? And if, and then do the other neighbors get to weigh in whether they like it or not? But, I mean, I think it's part of a whole, not, I'm just getting you, I look for some guidance, that's my question.
Absolutely. So I conferred with the building commissioner, we reviewed the file, and we felt it was best to use the same and consistent way that you used in 2007. It's a case-by-case situation where if a lot owner in that subdivision that was approved prior to planned residential development and had the 40% allowance, if they want to exceed current lot coverage caps, which are 20%, it's a simple letter to the planning board, your consideration. And the feeling at the time, the current building commissioner in the past, and the town planner, was that open space residential developments should be afforded the same lot coverage as planned residential developments are today. I.e., they should be allowed to exceed or go up to 40% of lot coverage, provided that the whole subdivision has more than 50% open space, which this subdivision does. So it's
That's
really,
my question.
it's really an administrative.
That was specifically what I was getting at.
And it doesn't affect the setbacks.
Correct.
Right.
Right, and it's a very minor increase.
It's really just to make sure the file is complete.
Right.
Okay.
Any other concern? No. Okay, so, have a motion?
That we approve Mr. McNaughton's request to
Increase the
Increase
lot
the lot
coverage from
coverage, thank you.
22.5 to 23.4% off his lot.
Second.
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Thank you.
So we'll have that letter uploaded to Permitize by tomorrow morning.
Awesome, thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
That earlier project was a good project.
It is, isn't it? Yeah, it's just a sticky wicket. Yeah. Okay, now, Paul. You're gonna talk about
Committee
your...
reports.
Yes, please.
Okay, I've asked to address the board on the committee reports. I attended 3 meetings last week that are, in my opinion, very significant in things that we've been doing, and I thought it was appropriate to bring up summaries of those meetings. And the 3, the water quality meeting, a management meeting on March 20th, the Falmouth Economic and Development Industrial Corporation meeting on March 21st, and the DEP Bridge Replacement Program on March 22nd. So I put together a little packet here to give you some flavor for what's going on. And I'm not going to go through all of this, but I do want to mention a couple of things. In item 1, the Water Quality Management Committee meeting, there's an agenda in here, and the 2 items I'd like to mention is Steve Raftery made a very good presentation on the overall evaluation of the ocean outfall. And I've included his presentation. I'm not going to go through the details, but you can look in your leisure about the limitations, the challenges for doing it, and various other things, geology, outfall locations, the modeling, the space needed for directional drilling, the route, all those things. And basically, they're going to want a permission to move forward with a study further to see what's the most appropriate outfall. And on the back of page 12, the outfall at Kite Park appears to be one of the better outfall locations, of course, of the offshore area. An outfall going to Buzzards Bay or the canal would have to go through a terminal moraine, which creates all kinds of geological problems. So basically, that's one of the issues they're going to study, and I think you should spend some time looking at what he came up with. It's a very, very good presentation. The other thing I want to mention in this agenda is item 6, is the Hilda Mengai and Earl Banhart have been pushing for the urine diversion toilets for some time.
Yep.
Community acceptance was just not there when they tried to give money to it, and they had proposed a study being done to look at what would happen if every person diverted their toilets and moved forward. After a discussion of well over an hour with a lot of people participating, the board decided that there is information available and not to proceed with that. But I want to mention it because it was a very well-attended meeting. The second item here is the EDIC session, and it's not terribly germane to the board here, but I think it's important. The intent of EDIC is to put housing at the Falmouth station.
Right.
And one of the things that came out of this, particularly with Jill Newbauer, who facilitated this session, I can't think of anyone better to do it, by the way, she was referring to it as community housing rather than low-income housing or affordable housing, because it's more responsive to the needs of the community. And I thought that was an interesting concept. But in her own fashion, she's very softly and very well, and she went through a whole series of things for the board of EDIC. Now, the attendance was limited. The only reason I knew about it was because I happened to attend the EDIC board meeting a week before, and they mentioned it. And I didn't see advertisement, and there was somebody from the county and one or two other people. Unfortunately, Housing Coordinator Kimberly Fish was not there. I don't know if she was invited or not. But going through our mission statement, the outline, why are you doing this project? And her intent was not to propose something, but just to talk to the board about what they really want to do here. It was more a strategy, how they should move forward. Do they really want to do this? But I thought the outline that she proposed and her presentation was extremely well done. And it's unfortunate more people from the housing community did not attend that, because it was extremely well done. I don't know if those sessions are online. I don't think they video those sessions, so they're probably not available.
Well, this seems like a step back. At one point, not that long ago, they were presenting renderings and floor plans for the project. It seemed further ahead than trying to find goals for the project. Goals for the project is like step one.
Well, you're right. What they had proposed was three options. One was a housing building a little north of the station, and two options down below. One was very intense.
Yeah.
And there was a petition by one of the neighbors, and about 100 people signed it opposing what they were trying to do. So they're rethinking it, and she was asked to come in and facilitate what does the board really want to do with the property. I think there's a lot of basic questions that have to be addressed, but if you look through what she was trying to do here, I thought a little philosophical, but I thought it was a very good outline, and it was a good discussion. At the end of it, they decided to have a small committee to look further into it. So I just want to bring that up because I think it's important on
But they
what they're
haven't
trying
dropped
to
the
do.
project.
I wish it was
Still-
more widespread because it was a very good discussion. And then she included this housing profile done by the Cape Cod Commission. I had not seen it before. Maybe John has seen it, Pam has seen it, but I had not seen that before. And it was specific to Falmouth on what the kind of housing. It was a very interesting report, and someone from the Cape Cod Commission did attend that meeting. So this, I thought, was extremely important for the board to read, because we're continuing facing these issues on all our projects.
What's the date? This is a really interesting report from the Cape Cod Commission.
Yeah.
What's
I'd
the
not seen
date
that
on this
before.
data?
I think it's a mix of dates. So,
Sorry,
I believe that they took data from the US Census Bureau for some of the information.
Yeah.
And then they have American Community Survey estimates for the remainder. And I think the most recent estimates are 2019, perhaps.
Yeah, because I think the latest population figures for Falmouth are actually lower than this.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
The 32,517 looks like at least 3 years ago, maybe.
Yeah,
Oh,
and
2019.
yeah, we're sort of stuck in that period between they did the census and the data's coming out, so
Right.
it's slowly coming out.
But even so, it's really interesting to go through.
I'd
all
not
of
seen this
fall.
before, and I thought this was very valuable.
Yeah,
Now, the third meeting was the Mass DEP Bridge Replacement Zoom meeting. There was a meeting in January, which I also attended, and they were talking about what people would like to see, the shape of the bridge and those kinds of things. This was far more detailed, and it had a lot of conceptual designs of what they're trying to do, particularly with the Bourne Bridge. They're going to repeat the same meeting tomorrow night on Zoom, and I put this information notice here, 6 p.m., and if you're really interested, you should attend that, because it's pretty remarkable. I couldn't get any information from that. The only thing from their website showed the original documents from January. So if you want to tune in on it, a lot of people attended. I was going to ask a question, but after 2.5 hours, I was number 58 on the list for asking questions, so I gave up. But there's a lot of details in there, a lot of information, and one thing that surprised me is on the canal side of the Bourne Circle, they had going from Trowbridge Road over to the road that goes to the school, and a big traffic lights along there. And of course, a really fundamental issue, I'm in favor of bicycles and bike paths and things like that, but I was under the impression you can't have bicycles on state highways. And if you look at Braga Bridge in New Bedford, there's no provision for pedestrians. I came over it just a little while ago, coming up from the airport, but there's no provision there. And then if you have a bike path and you're coming into a circle, that's a very dangerous situation for bikes. And once you
Dangerous
get
if you're
over
driving
there,
on a
there
car.
are no bike lanes on MacArthur, nor for that matter on Route 6. So
Well, we
I
have
think
very
there are a lot of
active,
concepts there, a lot of things to
bike
talk
committee.
about.
Bike committee. I imagine they're going to speak right up often.
And the bottom line is at this time, there's no federal funding.
Right.
So they're pursuing that, trying to do a better application for it. They're going to have preliminary concepts, and there's no cost estimate. So it's a long way to go. But if you're interested, you might want to just sit in and look at the graphics, because they're pretty impressive. All these different roads coming in and what they're trying to do, and it's,
Well, they're
I
leaving
need-
the existing bridges standing and in use until it's complete.
well, the bridges are going to be on the inside of the existing bridges to try to
Yeah.
take advantage of that. But in the Bourne, there's a park there. They're probably encroaching on the pond over there and a lot of other things. So it's going to be kind of, I couldn't get anything more recent. Maybe you have it.
I didn't have time, you went quickly. You said the outfall in Kite Park. Where's that pipe going? How far out is the outfall pipe?
Well, they got to do the modeling and find that out.
They didn't say?
No, they don't have the modeling yet.
That's just, my two favorite beaches are in the immediate area.
No, it'd be
I would
pretty far.
really be concerned, I want to know how far out that's going to be. My yacht club is right next door to that, and Falmouth Heights Beach is on the other side.
They're pretty far out.
I want to know that distance.
It's like they've gone to war against Falmouth Heights.
Yeah, it's like, okay, you won't take the wind turbines, now you gotta get the sewer, here we come.
So,
Bridges.
if I may, yeah, just for
Sorry.
the public's edification, so if you're interested in the canal bridges, you can just Google, Mass DOT canal bridges. They've got a whole website dedicated to just that topic. And to Paul's point, if you click on the latest updates, no feedback at this time. There's a little bit of information on the grants and the funding, but there's two things. One, you can submit a comment directly to Mass DOT if you're really interested. And then to Paul, what you were describing, this virtual public meeting is happening tomorrow. You do have to register in advance. It's typically a webinar setting where they're just describing the information to you. It is near and dear to my heart as I go over the bridges every single day. And I think it's a great time to mention it because we're dealing with extreme amounts of traffic every morning and every afternoon because we're trying to repair a bridge that has seen its last days.
Just a question to you as a commuter. How much extra time do you have to allow in order to do that?
This morning, I would have had to get here on time, 35 minutes.
Well,
Yep.
that's a lot.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
And going home at night? There's
Well,
quite a
tonight,
pileup.
knock on wood, there's no traffic. But in the afternoon, it varies. It really does. Yeah. So it can be anywhere between 10 minutes and 20 minutes. It's hard to predict in the afternoon.
Right.
Plus, Jed stays later just so he doesn't have to hit as much traffic. So he stays at work longer, leaves later than he needs to, so that he doesn't hit a lot of the traffic as well. So there's that added time too.
Yeah, what a guy.
Sacrifices are made on a daily basis.
Well noted.
But anyways, so information on the canal bridges, it's a really fascinating project, and to Paul's point, the engineering and the construction work that will occur with these two projects is going to be something to watch.
Well, the first thing to watch is the federal budget. Pam, you were going to say?
You just said Mass DOT town bridges.
Canal bridges.
canal bridges?
Or Cape bridges.
You just go Mass DOT, it
Yep.
pops right up. But I couldn't get the graphics that they showed at the meeting last week. And they were pretty spectacular, actually.
They were, yeah.
Did you attend the meeting?
I attended the ones in January.
Yeah, but this had a lot more detail.
I plan to attend tomorrow.
And you may want to look at it tomorrow.
Yeah.
Okay, moving on. That's all set? Well, I want to thank you for going to all these meetings and taking the trouble to really keep us informed.
I think these 3 meetings last week were important.
Yeah. They are.
How can I track this outfall pipe? What group is doing this?
What group is doing that?
What meeting did you go, where's this?
This was the water quality management.
So they, okay.
Yeah, they have regular meetings
I just want
every,
to alert people, they got to start paying attention to what they're, because I haven't heard of this.
It's going right past Kendall Lane.
No, it isn't.
they've been talking about it for over a year.
I missed it. This outfall, I've heard about the outfall pipe, but I didn't know they're doing it in Kite Park.
Well,
That's
it's not
That's the
necessarily,
part
that's
new to
not
me.
a decision.
Oh, I'm well aware of the outfall.
Well,
It's the Kite
somewhere
Park part that's got me.
buried in here, there's the one about the transmission line. That's got, the place where it lands is going to be up there behind Homeport, and then it goes over to the bike trail, and goes all the way down the bike trail apparently, and comes out where?
I don't know the exact location where
Oh,
it
it
comes
didn't
out.
say.
It goes into the ocean, but that's the electrical line for the vineyard. And that's I believe that's the replacement project for that. Very
That's going
old.
down Worcester Court right through the middle of Falmouth Heights Beach.
No, this is different.
That's-
This is not that one.
Right,
There's one right along the bike path.
right.
Oh, it's another one.
It's another one.
I believe that's just to supply the electricity to the vineyard.
So they don't have to have generators on Martha's Vineyard, something like that.
My limited understanding is that the line exists currently, but it is in poor shape and they need to essentially improve it. I could be wrong, but that's my understanding is that they're essentially,
There's a line to the vineyard that goes from Mill Road.
Right.
Is that what are they talking about tying into that one?
I don't know specifically, but
Because that comes, I think, down Shore Street, goes all along the beach to Mill Road. I watched them dig it.
The material
When it was
here
down Mill
just
Road.
said it was going down the
Not sure.
Shining Sea Bikeway. So it must go down the bikeway from, what would that be, at the end of Jones Road, and then down to the bikeway, and then turn on Mill Road. It's just before Mill Road, isn't it? Where the bike path is, and go down to the water.
It would be Mill
that's,
Mill Road and Elm Road
Yeah.
are the two roads that go from the bike path to be one or the other, because there's a pond in between.
Right, well, picture where the bike path is there,
Yeah.
and it would be following the bike path, so it's not on the road.
Okay, so it's going right through my backyard.
Yes.
I
Right,
tell you what concerns me, everybody's talking about the South Coast wind turbines coming up through Worcester Court or something. That's one parcel. There's about 7 or 8 parcels out there.
well.
How
and yet-
many cables are gonna come up? Why don't they get together and somehow get a joint system going?
Okay, that has been
I mean, I
proposed.
think they're looking at
It's been
that, but-
proposed, and their answer to it is, oh, that will take years. So,
But
yes,
there's-
that's a good idea, but it's not, they're not going to wait on South Coast for that to take place. So they're ready for that one. But you look at it and you wonder why they can't follow the route and keep it in the water for as long as possible and come up somewhere near Fall River.
Well, they are going, one leg goes to Braden Point.
Yes, and you could follow the same route and then veer off as it goes up through Buzzards Bay if they needed to come out in 2 different points.
I think it has to do with the electrical connection, the electrical capacity existing systems, where they can tie into the system.
No, apparently it has to do how cheap it is to put it in the land rather than underwater. This is a cost item,
This is a big deal, beyond our control.
very much so. So sorry for taking up the time. Future agenda items. Oh, correspondence.
Planning department report, or was that it?
Wait, I need my glasses. I'm sorry. Jed and Melinda.
I had forgotten all about it.
Me too.
So, just a few items. As many of you may know, we received the approval from the select board very recently to submit an application to basically get consulting funds to do a downtown parking management plan. This was an outgrowth of things we've heard about downtown and perhaps the limited supply of parking. And so we saw an opportunity to get some grant funding to have a consultant work on that. So we're hoping to submit that application very soon, and we'll likely see funding if we're awarded sometime in fiscal '24. So it'll be a ways out. But I wanted to update the board about that. I will also be joined by Town Council's office this coming Saturday to talk with the Select Board at their workshop about short-term rentals. My role in our discussion is essentially, what does the bylaw currently say about short-term rentals? And what does it say about rental property in general? And so I prepared a short series of slides. Obviously, it's a public workshop. I don't believe that they're intending to take any public comment, but there's going to be a short presentation about that.
What's considered a short-term rental?
Well, what we see in the bylaw is commercial accommodations. Commercial accommodations really is that catch-all for rental and lodging, rental lodging, basically.
So it could be one night, it could be 3 nights?
It's very vague. The commercial accommodation section of the bylaw is very, very broad. And it includes things such as I talked to you this evening, hotels, motels, lodging houses, boarding houses. It really runs the gamut.
Airbnb?
It does not specifically say those things. And so,
Is there any provision there for having commercial accommodations in residential districts?
so it is allowed by special permit in just about every zoning district in town, with the exception of the Marine District and 2 light industrial districts, the light industrial B and C.
But each instance would need a special permit,
That's correct.
and that isn't taking place now.
Not to my knowledge. And so obviously it's a hot topic. You know, the board's considered it, talked about it a little bit.
Right.
In fact, you know, at your last meeting, we talked at length about it. And so my role and legal counsel's role is to just essentially provide a little bit of introductory information for the select board to consider, for them to talk about policy. What sort of direction do they want to take with short-term rentals? So it'll be a brief introduction to that. And that's this coming Saturday.
Is this, by short-term rentals, I'm assuming you're definitely talking about summer rentals, people that rent their house for a week?
Yes, traditionally, yeah.
Which is a really big thing here in Falmouth, been going on for a long time. They're now gonna they're planning on regulating it.
Oh, nope, I don't want to give any wrong
I
impression.
just want to understand, it's a pretty big industry.
Sure.
And what are they doing about it? What's,
They're not sure yet. And so that's this introductory presentation that I'll be helping provide, is to help them understand what's out there and what they may want to do in the future with them, if anything at all.
You recall Doug Brown came to our last meeting to say that his concern with it is that we would then have, that he believes it's a business use in residential districts. That's the way he was looking at it, and nobody knows what they're going to do, but they're looking at it. And it's not so much because of practices that have been traditional here in Falmouth for not just decades, more than a century. It's because the practice is growing for corporations to begin buying up rows of houses.
and it's
So
the
it's the
Airbnb thing
scale.
too, which is
No,
different
this
than
includes
traditional.
Airbnb, and turn them all into Airbnbs.
I know, but Airbnb is like a newer trend, and the corporation's doing it. But people renting out their houses for a few weeks in the summer has been going on for 100 years.
Yes.
And the whole industry that I'm involved in survives on it. And we should be paying attention to it if they're getting ready. We probably want a seat at the table. Have they invited the Cape and Islands Board of Realtors to participate in this?
I don't know who they've invited, and I just want to reiterate, it's an introductory conversation. That they,
Probably a good time to get involved in the beginning.
and that would be up to the select board to you know, obviously invite whom they feel appropriate.
When is this meeting?
This is a workshop on Saturday here.
This coming Saturday.
This coming Saturday, 9 a.m.
And it's not specifically on their agenda, I learned.
I haven't seen it, and I haven't looked for it, but that's my report is, I'll be sort of covering what the zoning bylaw currently says.
It would be maybe a novel approach, but it would be a good idea to create at least a joint committee between the select board and the planning board to look at it.
Yeah, I think it's gonna be up to the select board to decide, what direction they wanna pursue, because I think there's a lot
Well,
to
we could
consider.
take it up individually, but it would be foolhardy.
So the next item, I have two more things. Unfortunately, and you folks are aware, we were working on the open space and recreation plan, the planning staff was, and we were nearly finished, and we were hoping to receive more grant funding to finish out that work. We were denied that grant funding to do so. So I believe we're actually pursuing other options for that, but I wanted to make everyone aware in case people were wondering where that was. So we've sort of had to put it on hold. We're nearly at the end. We're almost there. And then, of course, just update the board on recodification, the phase 2 effort. So the working group met last month, and there's a lot on the working group's plate. And so there's continual discussion about what we want to bring forward to town meeting. And so we're hoping to bring forward the idea of the home occupation. We've sort of gone through that bylaw several times. I think we're in a fairly good spot to bring that forward for possible edits. There's a new idea of pulling out the language from the accessory apartment section in the current use table. So if you're familiar with the bylaw itself right now, there's a lot of language in a table. We want to try to pull all that out and put it into Article 9, where we think it belongs better. And there's some discussion about how we're going to deal with non-conforming structures, uses, and lots. So that's a larger topic that we might be bringing to town meeting, maybe in November.
There was a discussion about how to deal with parking, so that the two ways that were talked about, not specific changes in the bylaws, but could we look at it from a chip away kind of an approach, fix the things that we know need fixing, Mike was recommending one, there've been others recommended, or do we wait until we can really do a very thorough job, which is a long-term project with a lot of detail to it? So it's what level of urgency do we feel about some changes, or waiting for a very full change, and that was not resolved.
And we're under somewhat of a time constraint because we need to have all of our articles ready for the board to consider and open a public hearing, by the end of the summer. So summer can go by very quickly.
Yeah.
And so we want to be respectful of that, and obviously bringing a lot to town meeting our first time around so there's a lot to consider in that. Plus, we have to address all of the Attorney General's comments with their approval of our second attempt at recodification, so there's quite a bit of stuff to
But that's
cover.
more technical.
It is more technical.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
That's it for us.
all right, so we're on now to announcements. There any announcements? General correspondence, there are 2 letters in here. One from one of the abutters reiterating and underlining points that she was making during the hearing at our last meeting, and a copy of the letter that I sent to the Enterprise. Future agenda items.
Sorry, I wanted to mention something. I thought you did an excellent job and need to be congratulated on your letter to the Enterprise.
Thank you.
Well, we all didn't agree on where that meeting went, but you brought up all sides, and our board voted, I believe, where we had to be, but everyone was allowed to speak, and you did a fabulous job. I was really impressed.
Yes.
Thank you,
No, I was really impressed.
thank you. The fellow who spoke last night at the select board lambasted me by name,
I think you should be congratulated by name. That was.
so I'm happy to hear this, thank
That
you.
was a fantastic letter. I thought you represented us extremely well.
Thank you.
Second.
This is good, thanks. Thank you. That feels good. Okay, future agenda items.
Can I ask a question? Before you jump to that, there's some handouts given here. Are you going to explain what they are?
I don't really know what they are.
There's one here from a certified mail from the Cape Cod Commission. and it's a legal document from the Office of Energy Affairs on the environmental impact report. Were we going to discuss this?
It's just general correspondence. It was sent to the planning board, so we put it into your packet. It's a notice of a public hearing that will be coming up soon in relation to that project.
There's no date on it.
What's that?
There's no date on it yet.
Correct. They're just putting you on notice that there'll be a public hearing coming up.
Okay.
But
Thank
you
you.
also need to have more than just every other page. It's how they sent it through.
Yeah,
And checked it.
We noticed today that unfortunately, the way they printed it, we did not get every page. So we're going to be following up with them to get every page. More to come.
Okay, so on agenda items, it's the work that comes in over the transom, and then we'll have our half-hour meeting. What will be on the agenda for the half hour?
So if you remember from, I believe it was Valentine's Day, 336 Old Barnstable Road, the subdivision plan, you had continued that to April 11th. We've met, or they have signed a continuance request, and so in order to basically allow for that continuance, we need to hold a meeting, very short meeting, to vote on that continuance.
Worth doing. Okay. And then there's our next meeting. I will be traveling in April, and unfortunately for me, I made the plans and set the dates for this over a year ago, and did not at that time consider meeting dates here. So I will be missing the meeting on the 11th and on the 26th. So Pat, our vice chair, will be doing that.
I can handle it.
I know it.
And I have a request because of that, and the only reason why it may come in is because I feel pretty strongly about the issues I brought up regarding the special permit.
Yeah.
We need to get that answered, okay, for me, because as it stands right now, I am going to abstain from voting on any special permit or site plan until that issue is resolved, because I look foolish voting on something that I've said we shouldn't do. I just have to, but if you're away, and there's two of us doing it, that, in a special permit, now we're getting to where numbers could really impact people. So let's get that resolved, and I'll go with what the board says when we have the vote. And if we get our recommendations from town.
The town
from council. But if we
Right.
leave that hanging, I'm gonna be abstaining, and with Charlotte gone, that's 5 board.
Yeah,
Could impact every special permit,
Sure.
because majority issue. So I'd like to get that, just put a little heat on
Right.
that. I'll go along with the board when we have the vote. I just
Oh, I
want to have
think-
the vote.
heat's
Okay.
enough heat.
I know.
Yeah.
I just want to make that, because you're being away, that could affect,
No, I
we've
can
seen
see.
what happens when the board's shorthanded, so it could, and you need
Right.
5 votes.
The cracks that can fall through
Yeah.
get wider.
I'd just like to point out the meeting is at the Lawrence School.
April 11th.
April 11th meeting's at the Lawrence School before town meeting.
Before town meeting. Oh, for heaven's sakes.
So we need,
Pictures, I'd like to know
it's, I
how
think
it
it's
goes.
room 10, it's either 107 or 109. It's in, it's 107. Is everyone going to be able to be there for the vote? I know you're not, you can't? Okay, are you gonna be there? Pat?
That's before the special town meeting, before the town
Correct.
meeting.
But that vote's only for an extension, right?
That's it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Problem.
It'll be just-
Are the John and Bob, you'll be there?
Yeah, we'll be there.
Super.
Move to adjourn?
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Meeting adjourned. Thank you.
I can make